everybody. Welcome to the second ever conversation episode of the Pondering Purple podcast. I just want you to know that if you're listening on your usual pod platforms, this is also available on YouTube as a full video, and you can find it by looking for the Pieces of Purple channel over on YouTube, and all of these videos in this series will be posted there. As you probably know by now, I will be releasing chapters of the book in audio format every month, which has already been done for chapters 1 and 2, and then having a conversation with an adult TCK that looks back at some of those themes covered in the chapter and delves into them a little bit more deeply. Today with Jon Mark, we go back to his adoptive culture. He grew up in Malaysia and Singapore, but what's interesting is that he started boarding school when he was 6 years old. So a lot of his core memories of those adoptive cultures are actually boarding school related. Now, if you've read any of what I've written before, you know that I have some fairly established feelings about sending kids to boarding school when they're in their elementary years. It is an ongoing debate in missionary circles. So I wanted you to know that in the show notes, there will be a link to the articles I've written about boarding school that express the results of some of the research I've done into this topic with MKs themselves, some of whom only did boarding in high school and some of whom started at a much younger age. I love this conversation with Jon Mark. We go through so much, so many questions that actually aren't addressed in the chapter, but that need to be. Things like what happens when your adoptive culture is actually boarding school, or what does it feel like to go back there with a spouse for the first time after you left there years ago? Is there an MK hierarchy? Are some MKs considered to be more MK than others, and what does that look like? And how do we feel as MKs if we haven't really connected with our adoptive culture in a meaningful way? And finally, we go into what is the value of remembering the past for our current day selves? What is the value of looking back and re-engaging with those experiences we had? This is a fascinating conversation. I hope you will find it to be that too. Anything that we mention in here in terms of resources will be linked in the show notes, so you're invited to go and look at those as further study on these topics. I'm just so glad that you're here with us today, and I'm happy to introduce you to Jon Mark Davis. And here we are with Jon Mark Davis, as promised. I met Jon Mark last summer at this reentry retreat in Canada called Reboot Reentry Retreat. It was his first time there. And actually, I think, Jon Mark, I would like to know just off the cuff what your impression was, because I don't think you did a reentry retreat years ago when you came back. What was your impression of this whole thing that we do now for TCKs returning to their passport cultures?
It was just wonderful. I mean, even for my own heart as a TCK, as a MK, going back to when I came to Canada, it was good to go back there in terms of my heart and what I had been thrown at and all that kind of stuff coming back to Canada. So it was good to live that at an older age, but also just to get to walk with these fellow MKs through everything from the guy who's grown up in PNG and is excited about riding on a school bus,
yes,
to the MK who's born and raised in Tokyo and not really getting certain things about Canadian culture today because it's just fresh for him. So yeah, it was an amazing event.
Tell us a little bit about your life, the bullet points of what your TCK life has been.
Yeah.
And you've got 30 seconds. Go. No.
Okay. So I was born in Japan. My dad was Australian, my mom Canadian. They met in Canada, felt God calling them to the mission field, so ended up in Japan. So my older brother and I were both born there. My oldest sister born in Canada. And then a short time after that, less than 2 years, we headed to Singapore to be on compound for the world headquarters for a mission organization. And so I grew up on the compound, so to speak. Compound makes it sound like it was military or something, but it wasn't. It was the headquarters. Really fond memories there. And then, my mom, when I was 6, was diagnosed with cancer, came to Canada for her. It was clear pretty quick that it was terminal cancer. So my mom passed away while we were in Canada. Within a short amount of time, God had brought my dad after that, together with a widow who was with the same mission organization, whose husband had been shot and killed preaching in Thailand. And so this family, are the Davises of 4 kids and a dad, joined with a mom with 3 kids, and we quickly headed back to the mission field. Fast forward going to boarding school. So I was not just an MK, but a BSK. Is that I'm making it up? A boarding school kid.
You might want to think that one through again.
Yeah, you write that one down, Michelle. Boarding school in Malaysia.
Mhm.
And then the Philippines. Our home base was still Singapore, but we only lived there a few months of each year. And then at 16 came back to Canada. So I know there was something that we did about helping us enter, but I knew I wasn't really invited in. It was for older kids. I was still
Yeah.
only going into grade 10. But that being said, just so grateful. Had an incredible home church youth group that I got plugged into, because culture shock was pretty major for me stepping
Yes.
into Canadian public high school and the world of Canada at 16. Um, Went off to university and began to grow my heart for missions. At first, I was like, "Oh, I want nothing to do with missions," because I saw the sacrifice and the challenges that my parents had gone through, and even the heartache I faced
Yeah.
being at boarding school. And yet the Lord really got a hold of my heart. And I mean, I always had the sense of desire for travel and adventure, but began to start doing short-term mission trips. So even in university, I got to lead one to
Oh,
Kenya for university students. Met my wife at university, who born and raised in Canada, but had a heart for missions as well. I'm married after university, began to teach, taught grade 8, mostly because I felt like a grade 8 kid still. So I love that age group.
that takes a special calling. I'm glad you have it.
Yeah, most teachers shudder at that age group, but
Yes.
for me, it was a joy, and taught for a number of years. But our goal, even though my wife was a trained teacher as well, our goal was that she could be at home full time with our
Mhm.
kids.
Yeah.
So kind of weird things came together. Not weird, but God's timing brought things together. And I ended up becoming a financial advisor to other endeavors. And so I've spent a lot of time helping to do short-term missions, as well as a lot of work with men, men's ministry stuff, fighting for the hearts of men, helping them
Yes.
deal with their pasts and gain healing, and as well step into their identity in Christ. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if that was longer than 30 seconds, but that's a
Well,
little bit about
the
me.
30 seconds was a joke, but but it was really close. Well
Yeah.
done. And I
Thank
gotta
you.
say that your training as a teacher comes out in your everyday, at least in what I saw at Reboot, in your everyday
Mm,
interactions with students. Not only did
okay.
you take the scary and complicated world of finance and make that feel accessible to them during the official sessions that you led, but you just have a way of drawing stuff out of them that they might be surprised just came out of them, actually.
Mm,
I think by
well,
virtue of
thank
your
you.
own authenticity and the kind of
Mm,
questions you're able to ask and the I don't knows you're able to offer as well. So I just wanted to
okay.
affirm that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, just recently, when was it that you went back overseas for a reunion of was it your high school boarding school, or
No,
did you do
no,
more?
actually, yeah, boarding school. So a school, grade 1 to grade 6.
Okay.
So yeah, God's timing. I went and helped with Reboot, and then within a week left for Southeast Asia.
That's crazy. You need a week to
Yeah,
recover after
yeah.
reboot.
Well, I don't know. Like Reboot just filled my heart. So I went back to the boarding school that I attended as a young child. I was there grade 3, 4, 5, and 6. Like, I
Okay.
mean, if you can imagine my younger brother, after losing his mom at 2,
Yes.
um, back to Asia, he started Chifu school in Malaysia in grade 1.
Wow.
Yeah, so Chifu school, just for our mission organization, there was on average maybe 80 to 100 kids there. He lived in dorms with
Mhm.
boys, for me, boys
Mhm.
my age, my cohort. So a very small school, but it was in a beautiful, beautiful setting, the tropical rainforests of the mountains of Malaysia.
Before we get to the actual reunion, well, number one, I need to say the boarding school topic is one that has been covered ad nauseum, and I have several articles on that as well, especially for
Okay.
young children. But secondly, so you get back to that continent and then to this
Yeah.
place that kind of framed your childhood in many ways. What does it feel like just to be there before you even see your old classmates in the school and everything? What does it feel like to get off that plane and be back in that place again?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think two caveats with that. One is each time, so I did this 7 years ago.
Yeah.
to the same sort of event. So I was more braced and prepared for it this time. Last time I went with four of my siblings from
Oh,
that blended family. So that was neat. And we landed in Singapore first. All we did was discuss where we were going to eat for each meal in
yes.
Singapore, walked all over the island for a few days, and then headed up to Malaysia and the Cameron Highlands. And so this time was actually my first time to bring Sarah to Asia. My wife had never been to
Wow.
Asia before. So we were in Singapore for just a really brief whirlwind time and then traveled up to the Cameron Highlands. And so her first time in Asia, first time in Singapore, Malaysia, first time stepping into my past.
That's
Um,
amazing.
yeah, so really, really beautiful. And since I had been through the experience already previously, I braced myself. I was ready for it,
Hmm.
but at the same time, I got to see it a little bit through her eyes
Hmm.
as well as not the experience through her eyes was pretty amazing, pretty wonderful as well. So, stepping back into my past, it's really interesting. I dealt with the grief of my loss of my mom
Yes.
came out in anger for me, a lot
Mm.
of anger,
Mm.
especially towards anyone in authority. I was ultimately angry at God
Yeah.
for taking my mom. And so, if you were a teacher or a dorm auntie at
Mhm.
Chifu and you remember John Mark, you were like, "Oh, I prayed a lot for that kid." Um, as angry as I was, Chifu was a very special place for me. As much as I longed for my
Yes.
parents and homesick and all of that, it was a really special place. And so many fond stories and memories. Like my kids know all these stories of all these different characters,
Tell a
so to speak,
couple.
from boarding school. Oh man, tell a couple. I'll give you one. I'll just give you
Okay.
one because it's pretty hilarious. So boarding school involved living in dorms with boys my age.
I mean, that's
Uh,
the recipe for disaster right
Oh
there.
yeah, looked after by a dorm auntie. And once a week, these dorm aunties would leave us in the care of like the Malaysians, like housekeepers or kitchen aid to go do a prayer meeting. And obviously, they needed that prayer meeting just to pray for us. But when they left for the evening and we were in bed, lights out, don't get out of your bunk. Of course, mischievous arose, and so there was one kid, and Sarah finds it hilarious that every time I tell a story, it's always the first and last names of my partners in crime.
Yes.
So Simon Kong had brought back from Thailand, where his parents were missionaries, this long fish stuffy. We call them teddy bears
Yeah.
now, but it's this long
Yeah.
stuffy. Well, it was a lethal weapon. Like he could use it. And so one time we had been. The whole challenge with the lights off, our dorm auntie's gone, was to see if we could get something off of his upper bunk without him hitting us and hurting us with his fish. And what happened was we realized that the cook was coming in to see what the noise was all about.
Mhm.
And so we all quickly went back to our beds and pretended we were all asleep, of course, so innocent.
Of course.
And Simon didn't realize this. So he's poised on the top bunk with his fish ready to hit
Oh
whoever
no.
next. And sadly, I feel bad. I need to find this woman and apologize personally. But she walked by his bunk. All he saw was this floating head, and he just let it rip with oh, that's terrible. What a terrible story. And
Oh
knocks her down. She's
no.
crying. We're
Oh
trying to
no.
plead with her that please don't tell our dorm auntie. So anyways,
Yes.
we were in huge trouble. But I learned at this reunion, one of my classmates, Ben Farrington from Australia, just this wonderful man that has like a photographic memory for all these
Okay.
experiences. He shared that when we got in trouble, he had not been involved in the horseplay at
Yeah.
all. And so he didn't get punished. We got punished. We were sent for like a week to bed right after dinner for this. We deserved it, obviously, but he didn't deserve it. And so the dorm auntie didn't punish him, the only one that didn't get punished, but he was punished more than us because we had to go to bed early as a collective. He had to hang out in the dorm auntie's room by
Oh
himself
no.
each evening. So I didn't learn that side of the story until this reunion because it
Yes.
was beautiful to come back again and get to hear some of his stories and
Yes.
a different perspective on the same stories and the same experiences. So there's a story for
There are
you.
so many
Sorry for
stories.
using your name, Simon Kong and Ben Farrington. Sorry for,
You just did it again.
yeah, sorry. Oh, wrecked the confidentiality, I'm sure, of something or other.
Um,
So.
When you went back with Sarah, what
Mm.
did you want her to see and experience? What were the top things in your mind that you thought, this is important, this is anchored to my past in some way that I want her to know about it too?
Sure. Well, and I think one of the things that's amazing is that this location in the rainforest in Malaysia, it's a really unique part of Asia. One, it's super cool, never gets hot. The rains, the mountains, the mist, everything is beautiful there. And it's like God has kept his hands around that property. And so in year 2000, the school closed.
Hmm.
But even, and this is a Muslim country. This is, different than other settings. And yet, an organization, a Christian organization, bought the property and preserved it for a retreat center. And so
Hmm.
when you step back onto the property, it's almost as if you're stepping 30 years
Wow.
in the past. Like the setting, the beautiful trees, the jungle surrounding it, the
Huh.
sights and sounds. So, I was so excited for Sarah. I actually got out of the car with her at the front gates of the property and we walked in together, which was just beautiful. So for her to get to see the setting of the
Yeah.
jungle, to hear the rain, to see the mist come in down through the
Wow.
trees, that was big. As well as when I was at boarding school, like the food was terrible, terrible. Like a British boarding school where every vegetable was overcooked, and by the time you had to eat it, because you had to eat everything on your plate, it was soggy and cold.
Oh,
I still cannot even stand the sight of cooked cauliflower
okay.
because of that. And I became the master of concealment of all the vegetables I was supposed to eat. But I knew from the last reunion that they were doing Malay food. Imagine that in
Wow.
Malaysia doing incredible food. So for Sarah to get to experience local dishes was amazing. And then it brought out a lot of stories of the past
Yes.
of those meals. And so those, I guess, were some of the really beautiful things that
Yeah.
Sarah was invited in to relive and experience. So
I'm
yeah, really, really
curious.
great.
I frequently recommend to MKs who are dating or engaged or even married to take their spouse, if they're not from that part of the world, back to where they grew up. And a lot of times the spouse or the significant other will say, "You're different here in
Mm.
some small way than
Oh,
you are when we're back home." Did you hear anything like that
oh.
from Sarah when you were there, or did
I,
something
I,
come bubbling out of you? I'm so sorry, but I just need our listeners to know that there's groundskeeping going on outside my window, and hopefully it'll get edited out. But if you hear something, there's not a tractor in my office. Okay, please
yeah.
no.
Yeah, that actually, Michelle, maybe you know, that's maybe the most poignant question of where my heart is at right now.
Mm,
Is that my wife and I have been happily married for 25 years. I mean, we've taken our kids on short-term mission trips to Peru and Nicaragua. Like, we've got to do a lot of things, but my wife has seen that I really come alive
mm,
in international settings. She knows, like in Canada, if we go to a new place, she knows within a few minutes she's going to turn around and see me talking to someone who looks like they're not from Canada.
yeah,
So that's sort of a bit of who I am. But she's actually kind of challenged me on this labeling MKs, fellow MKs, as my tribe.
yeah,
Because I feel like when I go to reboot, I'm gushing all over these rebooters because that third culture kid experience, that shared experience really does allow my heart to come alive. And her question to me is, can you start to see our family as your
mm,
tribe? But yeah, there's something really important there that
yeah,
I'm seeking to give to the Lord about
yeah,
why do I come alive in these settings, and I don't want her or my kids to ever feel
yeah,
like I'm holding back with them,
yeah,
but what's there that I still have opportunity
yeah,
for more healing and growth in.
yeah.
So I don't know if that answers the question, but
It
I do know it's
does.
an poignant one.
And it almost makes me want to do a whole other podcast just on that topic, because you're not alone. You're not
Mm,
alone. There's something about stepping back into our adoptive cultures. There's a homeness to it, for lack of a better word, that feels like it's in our DNA. and
Yeah.
it doesn't conflict necessarily with our actual DNA relatives and homeness in other senses, but it's so different and so full-bodied that sometimes it's something that we really need to stop and take into account and figure out how to
Yeah.
manage both of those internal homes that we've crafted as being TCKs.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
do you remember when you first came back? You were in 10th grade, right?
Hmm.
Do you remember if you were doing anything, if you had any habits, if you had any ways of life that were related to what you experienced in Malaysia and that didn't exactly fit in the Canadian side of your life?
Oh man, yeah. I remember years later hearing of how the neighbors thought it was so weird that this family of seven kids who
Yes.
were always outside on our street were always barefoot. They're
Yes.
like, Canadian kids, they always wear shoes. We were always
Yep.
barefoot. During the big rains, like we would have such fun outside because of the rainy season in
Yep.
Southeast Asia.
Yep.
Food was always a big deal. I mean,
Of course.
even today, I'm working through um, a bit of a struggle with eating because whenever there's free food,
Hmm.
man, my responsibility is to take
Uh-huh.
part, to dig in, to eat as much as I can,
I love how you call
and
that your responsibility.
yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, one being one of seven kids,
Yeah, that's
boarding
right.
school, like we honestly ate with our hand on the serving bowls as fast as we could so no one else could pull that serving bowl away
Yes.
and take seconds before we could. So again, that feast, the
Yeah.
famine scarcity
Yeah.
mentality.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think probably, and this may be taking us in a different
Hmm.
direction, but I also came back to Canada feeling this very big obligation, this responsibility that to be a Christian meant I had to be perfect. Yeah, like coming back into Canadian culture, like I remember, I still can remember standing outside my high school at the end of my first day of high school. One, I didn't even know yet the route to walk home, so I was waiting to get picked
Yeah.
up. And, these kids walking past me, swearing,
Yeah.
rude jokes, posturing. And I was just like, where am I?
Hmm.
And sort of making this agreement in my head that, man, to be a good witness for God, I'm just going to have to be perfect. That really shaped a lot of my adult Christian life. I'm still receiving healing in that.
Yeah, and
Mm,
when it comes out of a spirit of self-preservation or
mm,
obligation,
yeah.
it looks really good on the surface, but it's actually kind of a burden that we take on.
Oh, it's
Yeah,
exhausting. It really
yeah,
is. Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
So we're actually going to go into that quite a bit more in depth when we hit the shoulds chapter, which is coming up.
Mm,
But take me back to your reunion. How did it impact, going back, I realize you were there 7 years ago. So either then or now, how did it impact your sense of wholeness or groundedness or rootedness, whatever the word is that we want to use around this? How did going back impact you as far as who
sure.
you are?
Yeah. Um, I think so. 7 years ago, when we went back, there was this incredible counselor, Ulrika, who led the sessions. She
Mm,
was really intentional with those sessions. But I remember her helping me to recognize that there was grieving in a lot of areas I hadn't thought
mhm.
about,
Yeah.
like as simple as grieving food. Like
Yes.
when you leave Asia and somewhere like Singapore, the food's incredible, and you
Yes.
leave there, there's grieving that goes on, and that's actually okay.
Yes.
That's good. So grieving physical things, grieving cultural things is
Like what?
necessary. I think in Singapore, for example, it's a unique part of Asia, and it's very clean, it's very
Mhm.
organized. It's almost
Mhm.
now you go back and you're like, whoa, this was not very healthy
Yes.
in terms of like social
Yes.
conformity. But at the same time, I remember coming back to Canada, and within a few years of being in Canada, there was this news article. Everyone in the world was aware this American teenager in Singapore was going to be caned for
Mm.
vandalizing these
Yes.
cars. And for me, I'm like, I don't know
Yeah.
about cane, but I understood
Yes.
knowing the culture of Singapore and the safety that was offered,
Mhm.
the cleanliness. And so coming back to Canada, where there wasn't that same
Uh-huh.
respect for public spaces,
Uh-huh.
respect for the older
Mhm.
generation, cultural things that you step into Canada that aren't. valued the same. And
Yeah.
you have to be like, oh, okay, I've got to somehow adjust to,
Yeah.
I just want to fit in into
Yeah.
this new culture.
Yeah.
But there's parts of me that, do I just turn those off? Do I shut those
Yes.
away? Or do I find out how to integrate those?
What would you suggest to TCKs today? Because that is a very real wrestling between, do I flip that switch and just act like I completely belong, in your case in Canada, or how do I manage to somehow keep both those lives and both those identities alive, maybe favoring one over the other, depending on the circumstance? How do you find that?
Yeah, and I almost feel like, oh, who am I to give advice to anyone? But I'm also straddling two generations
Yes.
in terms of a generation that didn't have WhatsApp and Zoom,
Yeah.
and so what one thing that I did, and not for the healthy way that I should have, but I basically said goodbye to my old life. I think for me, some of the healthy ways I did maybe maybe
Hmm.
try to was embrace those parts of me that were, that did come alive with, like, I love food, for example, and food from other countries. Even my kids now are the most adventurous you'll know, of willing to try anything new for
Yeah.
the sake of experience.
And you actually mentioned a couple minutes ago, you would be amazed at the number one thing when I ask MKs or TCKs what they miss from other countries. Food is
Mm.
usually in the top three. And I think it's
Yeah,
because it internalizes a culture, right? There's something
yeah,
psychological about taking it into our bodies, and it
yeah.
reminds us in a visceral
Yeah.
way
Oh, yeah,
of
and
places
and
we've
and
been.
and I mean, olfactory sense, smell is such a
Yes.
powerful
Yes.
memory cue that it's amazing,
Yeah.
that gift that God gave us, for sure. I just think this idea of the wrestle. The
Yeah.
wrestle's okay between, this is the culture I know and love, this is the
Yeah.
one I'm not really sure I'm sold on. Um, that's okay. That's okay to take time to figure out what it looks like to embrace the past that you've left, and embrace this new culture that you're
Yeah.
being invited into,
Yeah.
and understand how those
Yeah.
actually can work really well together. I
Yeah.
mean, your book, Michelle, talking about that, these pieces of purple,
Mhm.
it's actually a beautiful, beautiful thing, and a part of us that we can really embrace. And we
Yeah.
seem to naturally, as kids, know how to blend those really well.
Yeah.
I think as we get older,
Hmm.
we're like, oh, maybe that's not the healthy way, and maybe we're wrong. And I also know, there are some of the ways that I responded to challenge and trauma as a kid,
Yes.
I still respond that way as an adult. And those strategies as a kid may have helped me survive,
Yes.
protected me as a
Yes.
kid, but they're
That's
not
right.
they're not healthy as an adult. So that's some
Yeah.
stuff I'm wrestling with now.
We carry so much of that in our purple, not just the memories, not just the things we love and miss, but
Mm,
the tragedies or the traumas that we've experienced as well. And my fear is when we choose one place over another, or one self or home over another, is that we leave some of that unaddressed in that other place,
mhm,
in that other piece of our purple, and it lingers on far longer than it needs to without finding any
mhm,
healing. And then there are those magical moments when we run back into people who are our kind of purple, you know? So you go back to your school where you were in those really formative years. And
mhm.
what did you find, if anything, that you all still had in common? And in what ways had your lives kind of taken you in diametrically opposed directions?
Mm, mm. I think, those shared memories, I think for all three of us that were from our
Yeah.
cohort there, Chifu was a really positive time in our life.
Okay.
That setting, as hard as it was, there was some positive. So having that share together,
Yes.
reliving those, filling in the
Yeah.
gaps for each other,
Celebrating.
we're, yeah, celebrating and embracing it. It was really a special thing, and for Sarah to get to sit in on those
Yes.
and hear those, listen. Um, what was so interesting is realizing their stories that carried on after they left, or after I left,
Hmm.
um, had a lot of hard things
Hmm.
to face and struggle through. But I think what was beautifully healing for all three of us
Hmm.
was recognizing that, our past is an important part of us, um, and that God's not done with us yet.
Yeah.
Like he does want to bring full healing. He does want to help us integrate all of those experiences and challenges well, blend that purple into all areas in a beautiful way if we trust him, if we're
Yes.
willing, to trust him. Because I'm learning, so much of the harm from our past, God's actually going to allow and invite present
Healing.
struggle and strife and
Yeah.
sometimes even loss to bring those wounds back to the
Yeah.
surface so that they can be healed properly.
And the irony is that you mentioned being back with those other guys and celebrating and rejoicing and remembering in this really positive way. And sometimes the wounds that we carry come from that same place and that same phase of life as well. So there can be a tendency to just remember the good stuff or to just remember the hard stuff.
Uh-huh.
And it's a unique ability for a lot of MKs to be able to carry both at the same time. But that
Mm.
requires, I think, an intentionality because sometimes it's easier just to live on one side or the other of that spectrum. And
Yeah.
with intentionality, with other people who share our memories and have shared our lives in other spaces, we can actually begin to discover how our lives have been enhanced and
Hmm.
challenged, and therefore take steps towards healing without having to disown any aspect of what that past was.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree with you
Yeah,
because I think our tendency might be to disown it because we just don't know how to
yeah,
integrate it and then
yeah,
never get back
that's
to
right.
going like, of the seven siblings, we were all invited to go back to that reunion.
Yeah,
One, I love him. He just didn't have
yeah,
any desire to go
yeah.
back there.
Yeah. And we honor that, right? We honor that that's where he is. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Is there anything from the chapter, or even if you want to expand into the rest of the book, is there anything that we haven't covered that you wanted to say today?
Well, I think for me, like I'll be honest with you, Michelle, I
Yeah.
kind of felt like, man, if anyone you could pick to do this chapter, this is not the chapter for me. And to unpack that a little bit, one was, and this might not apply to anyone or few people, it
Hmm.
may apply to who were in cultures where they didn't have the opportunity to fully embrace, like being a boarding school kid.
Yes.
I didn't get to fully embrace life
Yeah.
in Singapore because I was only there a few months of the year, or even
Yeah.
in being in Malaysia, I was at this boarding school
Yeah.
where we spent like we had adventures in the jungle every weekend, but in terms of cultural settings, getting
Yeah.
to see much of Malaysia wasn't much there. And
Yeah.
one example is language, right? I
Right.
didn't have to learn Malay. And
Yeah.
so as a kid, you just get by with whatever you have. And we'd
Yeah.
go into town to spend our pocket money at the store buying pocket knives or rope for forts.
As
But
one
you can
does.
speak, yeah, of course. And you speak English and they totally
Yeah.
understand and you're fine. Singapore,
Yeah.
English is the working language. And so, that for me was really sad. The
Yeah.
hardest question people ask me nowadays when they find out I was born in Japan and grew up in Asia is they're like, well, what other languages
Of
do you
course.
speak? And I'm like, I don't even speak English very well, so none. So don't ask me that question, you big
Yeah.
jerk. But that wrestle between, yeah, did I really get to embrace that culture
Hmm.
fully? And what is it about Singapore that really is me?
Hmm.
And I want it to be more of me than
Yeah.
I think it is. I
Yeah.
don't have a language to show
Yeah.
off from
Yeah.
living somewhere else. I have some memories, but
Right.
so for me, that's been a tough
Yeah.
one. I think.
Do you feel like there's Do you feel like there's a hierarchy in the missionary world, even among MKs, that says that if you speak three languages, you're a higher kind of status of MK than if you speak no extra languages? And if
Mm.
you've really been embedded in a culture with the people and the foods and the cultural quirks and all of that, that you're more of an MK
Mm.
than if you just kind of floated in and out of that culture on your way to and from boarding school. Do you feel like there's almost a subconscious judgment on MKs who
Yeah.
don't have all the languages and
Well,
everything?
and I would say from my experience, I don't think it's necessarily a judgment of people who do speak those three languages on those who don't. I
Yeah.
think it's more on myself
Yes.
of man, I don't like these other guys, like they speak these
Yeah.
languages, they were totally immersed.
Yeah.
Oh, like I don't. And so that's in my head. That's,
Yeah.
the judgment I've created for myself.
Yeah.
So, but I do think I think there's something definitely there that may
Yeah.
have actually not been instituted by those who feel
Yes.
superior so much as those who maybe feel inferior.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm here to tell you that even if you didn't really embed in the culture there because of the boarding school, because you were a boy that age too. I mean, there are so many different factors. They're still formative in some way, and I know you know this, but there are still ways that we were shaped just by even brushing up against a culture that we might not realize as mature adults, well embedded in a new kind of solid culture now in our later years. So I want to encourage you and other TCKs who are listening who feel like, well, I don't have any of that in me anymore. I mean, I've so far moved on. I didn't really connect at the time, whatever the case might be,
Hmm.
that it is still in there somewhere. There is still a purpleness that recognizes itself when you get off that plane. Even if it was just a place where you vacation between stints at boarding school, there is still a knownness of self when we get back to those places that have, in some subtle way that we don't even recognize, shaped who we are today.
Sure. Thank you. I
Yeah.
received that. And I think even Michelle, again, not trying to go another way for
Yeah.
another whole podcast, but, even, you having the same conversation with my spouse, with Sarah,
Yeah.
she probably can she knows me better than anyone. She can
Right.
draw out some of those that I take for granted
Right.
and don't really see in
That's right.
myself, some of those qualities. And I want to say one other thing
Yeah.
is, Michelle, this is not staged, but Michelle, I had your book. And so the woman who was running the sessions, she did a wonderful job. And I gave her your book to just say, hey, this is amazing. I'm loving it. And so what she did is she borrowed it from me. She devoured it in 36 hours. And then
Wow.
over the week, used stuff from your book and
Wow.
just was really that was a real gift to us,
I
from
love that.
you through this wonderful woman, Elwyn, who ran the group. So just,
Oh,
I so appreciate your book. I'm excited even now I've been sharing with other people.
that's
Thank
fantastic.
you, Michelle, for saying yes to writing that book.
That's so validating. Thank you. That's what I wanted it to be, a resource for other people
Mm.
who are working with or loving or in relationship with TCKs. I end every one of these, and there's only been two, so it only takes one repeat to be a tradition, right?
Okay.
By asking the person being interviewed what one word of advice you would give to TCKs who are listening.
What? That's really hard.
These were in the questions I
One.
sent to you.
Yeah. Well, and I guess it'll just have to come from where I'm at right
Yes.
now. I've been married 25 years. Like it's been a lot more than that since I was a missionary's kid, in Southeast Asia. And yet, God's never done with us. I don't want to get into the theology of why bad things happen,
Yeah.
but I am seeing time and time again right now in my heart, that He's surfacing tough
Mhm.
stuff,
Mhm.
with the purpose of bringing healing.
Yeah.
If I'll trust Him, if I'll
Yeah.
surrender that to Him.
Yeah.
And sometimes surrender is clear of what I need to let go of.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm not even sure what surrender is, other than
Yeah.
saying, God, I don't get this,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I do want healing. I wanna come into further wholeness.
Yeah.
And so those hard times we can try and run away from.
Yeah.
We can't use the strategies we used as a kid,
Yeah.
but we can be confident that He who began a good work, I mean, He's not done. He's going to
Yeah.
keep growing us and healing us and bringing us to wholeness. And so I'm hopeful.
Yeah, and just to put a little button on that, it doesn't mean that God wanted us to suffer or have hard times, but He wants us to be able to remember them now so that we can find healing, as opposed to putting the lid on it and making believe it never is.
Absolutely. I think like
Mhm.
He saw our tears. He
I know.
saw the injustice of it,
Mhm.
the separation, and how
Mhm.
tough that was. He was there then.
Mhm.
He's here now. He hasn't changed. He hasn't left us. So, yeah,
Yeah.
thank you, Michelle. Thanks for
Yeah.
even bringing that up.
Thank you so much for taking the time out to have this little chat today.
It's been absolutely my pleasure. I know you'll have to edit a lot, some of the things.
We're at 15 minutes. We'll see if I can get it back down to about 40. So that's not too much
Okay.
editing.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thank
Yeah.
you, Michelle. This has been great for my own heart.
And I'm so glad that you got to go back, and I'm so glad that you got to go back with Sarah. And I think you would agree with me that we encourage anybody who has a spouse or a significant other that going back to those places that shaped us, even in small ways, is a really important thing.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Jon Mark.
Thanks, Michelle.
And that was Jon Mark Davis. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. There's obviously a lot more thinking that can be done on any of these subjects that we raised in our 15 minutes together. And I do encourage you to look at the show notes for links to some of the articles we mentioned so that you can do some extra reading on your own. Thank you so much for joining me today for this conversation. Remember to check back in a couple of weeks for Chapter 3, and then 2 weeks after that for the next episode of Conversation with an Adult TCK. In closing, I want you to know, as usual, that I celebrate the purple you are or the purple you love. Have a great day.